Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. We're tackling risk today.
Ooh, risky business.
Yeah, kind of, right? We're diving into Nate Silver's book, On the Edge, The Art of Risking.
Love that book.
It's fascinating, right?
Yeah.
And we're going beyond just like the how-to of gambling,
Yeah.
right? Like how to play poker or bet on sports. We're really going to look at why people are drawn to risk and, what separates the winners from the losers.
And what I think is so interesting about this book is that Silver, he doesn't just focus on like the obvious things, right? Like casinos or sports betting.
Yeah.
He really expands this idea of risk taking to include, things like venture capital or even like the people who are developing AI, which we'll get into later.
And so he sees this common thread, right?
Right.
This mindset that connects people who, might be high-stakes poker players to, like you said, those people investing in startups, even the ones working on things like AI.
Yeah, and he calls it the river, right? Like this sort of metaphorical space where all these different types of risk takers exist.
Like they're all swimming in the same current.
Yeah, exactly. And what's interesting is that Silver himself, I mean, he's definitely a Riverian, right?
Oh, totally.
A former poker pro, that guy who predicted elections with, let's face it, pretty incredible accuracy.
Yeah, I mean, he's got street cred to talk about this stuff.
Absolutely.
I'm curious, after we finish this deep dive, are we going to find that we have some Riverian tendencies ourselves? Maybe, maybe not.
Well, you never know, right? One of the first things Silver does is he challenges that common perception of gambling as being purely about luck.
Yeah, which I think is something a lot of people assume, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's all just random chance.
Right. But he uses a story from his own poker playing days to illustrate this, and it's kind of a crazy story.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about this.
Okay, so he was playing in this high-stakes poker tournament, right? But here's the thing. He had to wear a mask the whole time.
What? Why? Was this during COVID?
No, this was before that. It was a special event, like designed to make it even harder to read your opponents.
Wow, so you couldn't even see their faces, their tells.
Right, exactly. And Silver talks about how, even for him, someone who prides himself on his analytical skills, it was incredibly unnerving.
I can imagine. I'd probably fold every hand.
Yeah, it just shows how much of a psychological and emotional game poker really is, Even when you think you're being all rational and data-driven, there's this gut feeling, this intuition.
So you're saying even the best poker players can't completely ignore their emotions?
Definitely not. And Silver even talks about his experience betting on the 2016 election as an example of calculated risk.
Oh, yeah, the Trump election. That was a pretty bold move to bet on him, right? Most people didn't see that coming.
Well, exactly. And Silver acknowledges that, it was a long shot.
Yeah.
But he points out that sometimes the biggest rewards come from taking those risks that others are afraid of, as long as you've carefully, assessed the potential payoff.
So it's about having a good understanding of the odds, but also having the guts to make that bet, even when it seems like everyone else is betting against you.
Absolutely. And then Silver really dives deep into the world of poker, specifically, where skill and strategy play, a huge role. He talks about how modern poker strategy relies heavily on something called game theory.
Game theory. Okay, that sounds pretty intense.
Yeah, it can be.
It reminds me of like those prisoner's dilemma things they talk about in economics class.
Yeah, it's related to that. Essentially, game theory is about making decisions in situations where, the outcome depends on the choices that other people make.
Like, how do you make the best move when you don't know what your opponent is thinking or planning to do?
Exactly. And in poker, game theory can help players figure out the optimal way to play their hands, even when they have incomplete information. He even talks about something called the Nash equilibrium, which is kind of a key concept in game theory.
Okay, so break this down for me. What's the Nash equilibrium like in the context of poker?
So imagine you're playing a hand, right? And both you and your opponent have made some bets. The Nash equilibrium is a point where neither player can improve their situation by changing their strategy, assuming the other player keeps theirs the same.
So it's like a stalemate where both players have made the best possible decision based on what they know at that moment.
Exactly. And Silver explains how top poker players use the Nash equilibrium to guide their decision-making and increase their chances of winning.
But it's not just about the theory, right? There's also the practical side of poker, and it seems like technology has really changed the game. Silver talks about these things called poker solvers.
Oh, yeah, the solvers. It's pretty mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah, it sounds futuristic.
They're basically computer programs that analyze millions and millions of poker scenarios
Oh.
to figure out, like, the statistically optimal strategy for every possible situation.
So it's like having a supercomputer whispering in your ear telling you the best move in every hand. That's insane.
It kind of is, and Silver uses this to illustrate how poker is becoming much more analytical, more data-driven.
So the game's evolving.
Yeah. And he talks about this famous match between Doug Polk, who's known for his mastery of this game theory optimal or GTO style of play,
Okay.
and Daniel Negreanu, who's more of like an intuitive player.
Oh, so it's like a battle of the bots versus human intuition.
Exactly. And Polk, the GTO master, he ended up winning, which, it kind of highlights this shift towards a more data-driven approach to the game.
So does that mean like intuition and experience are no longer important in poker?
Not necessarily. Silver highlights another top player, Vanessa Selps,
Okay.
who's known for blending analytical skill with this incredible intuition.
Yes, she's got the best of both worlds.
Yeah, exactly. And Silver describes her style as this aggressive razor fold attitude,
Wow.
where she's either pushing all in or getting out of the hand completely.
That's pretty bold. Not for the faint of heart.
Definitely not. But it also speaks to this idea of, knowing when to go all in and when to cut your losses, which applies to poker and honestly to life in general.
It's like that classic saying, know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em.
Exactly. But even with all the skill and strategy, there's still this element of luck in poker, right? Like sometimes the cards just don't fall your way.
Mm-hmm.
And Silver dives into this with this concept he calls variance.
Variance.
Yeah. He uses the example of this hypothetical player called Pretty Good Penelope.
Pretty good Penelope. Okay.
So Penelope, she consistently makes good decisions at the poker table, right? But she still faces these inevitable ups and downs, those swings of fortune that every poker player experiences.
So even if you're doing everything right, you can still hit a streak of bad luck.
Exactly. And it can be brutal.
Yeah.
Even the best players go through these prolonged losing streaks. And Silver's point is that long-term success in poker, or really in any high-variance environment, it hinges on being able to weather those downswings and then capitalizing on the big wins when they come.
So it's not just about making the right moves. It's about having the mental toughness to handle the inevitable setbacks, that emotional resilience.
Absolutely. And this resilience is especially important when we talk about the challenges faced by, certain groups in the poker world, like women.
Yeah, it's no secret that professional poker is still very much a male-dominated world.
It is. And Silver uses the experience of Lorianne Persinger, a Black female poker player, to highlight some of those challenges.
Okay.
He talks about how Lorianne has faced, overt sexism and misogyny at the poker table.
It's awful that that still happens in this day and age. In a
Huh.
game that's supposed to be all about skill and strategy, it shouldn't matter who you are or what you look like.
Right. But unfortunately, it does. And Silver also discusses this, the intense scrutiny that women face when they win, using the recent Robbie Jade Liu cheating scandal as an example.
Yeah, that was a wild story. It seemed like she was damned if she did and damned if she didn't. If she lost, it was because she wasn't good enough. And if she won, well, then she must have cheated.
It's a tough reality for women in poker. And Silver, he doesn't shy away from these issues. He examines the systemic factors that contribute to this gender gap and emphasizes the need for greater inclusivity and respect in the poker world.
It's a conversation that needs to be had for sure. So we've talked about poker, which, even though it has a luck component, is still a very skill-based game. But Silver also explores those games where the odds seem stacked against you from the start, like blackjack and even slots.
Yeah. He talks about advantage players, those who somehow find ways to beat the house, which always sounds kind of crazy to me.
I know, right? I thought the whole point of those games was that the casino always wins in the long run.
Well, that's what most people think.
Huh.
But Silver reveals this whole underground world of advantage players who approach those games, with this really strategic mindset.
So like card counters and blackjack.
Exactly. And he even tells the story of a guy named Carter Loomis, who was a professional slots player.
Wait, a professional slots player? I thought those were purely luck-based.
Right. That's what most people assume. But Silver explains how these players, they look for subtle biases or patterns in the machines, ways to tilt the odds in their favor, even if it's just a tiny bit. And get this, Loomis actually won a jackpot during a short break just to make a point about how he's able to find these unexpected advantages.
That's incredible. So you're saying even in those games that seem completely random, there are people who can find a way to beat the system.
It's pretty mind-blowing, and it provides this interesting contrast to the more, compulsive gamblers who are seeking something else entirely from those games, like maybe escape or comfort in what Silver calls the machine zone.
The machine zone. What is that?
You know those people who sit at slot machines for hours on end, like totally oblivious to everything around them?
Oh, yeah. I've definitely seen those folks at the casino.
Right. They get into this state of flow, almost hypnotized by the spinning reels and, that promise of a big win.
Just like they're in a trance.
And Silver raises some ethical questions about this.
Oh, how so?
Well, he points out how casinos are very deliberately designing those games and those environments to keep players engaged, even if it means, exploiting addictive tendencies.
Yeah, that's kind of disturbing when you think about it that way.
It's a complex issue, and Silver doesn't pretend to have all the answers. He simply presents the facts and challenges us to think critically about, the darker side of an industry that's built on risk and reward.
It's a lot to consider. This deep dive has already been so eye-opening. We've gone from the strategic world of poker to the almost hypnotic allure of slots. And it feels like Silver's just getting started.
He is. Next, he takes us into the world of sports betting, which is, blowing up in popularity right now.
Oh, absolutely. And it seems like there's this constant debate about whether it's more about luck or skill.
Right. And Silver, he takes us behind the scenes at the Westgate Superbook in Las Vegas,
Oh, wow.
one of the biggest sports books in the world, to show us how those odds makers actually set those betting lines.
So we get to peek behind the curtain and see how it all works.
Exactly. And it's this fascinating mix of human expertise and sophisticated algorithms.
Oh, I bet.
You've got these traders trying to anticipate how people are going to bet, balancing those books. And then you've got the sharp bettors who are trying to find those tiny edges to exploit any inefficiencies in those lines.
It sounds like a constant cat and mouse game.
It totally is. And Silver, he even tried his hand at sports betting.
Oh, really? Mr. Data himself decided to place some bets.
He did, yeah. He spent a whole season betting on the NBA.
To see if he could put his money where his mouth is.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that he actually ended up losing money.
Really? So even Nate Silver, with all his statistical modeling, couldn't beat the odds.
Well, it just shows how challenging it is, even for someone with his expertise. And then he introduces us to someone who did manage to make a fortune from sports betting, Billy Walters.
Okay, so Billy Walters is the real deal.
He's considered one of the most successful sports bettors of all time.
Wow.
And Silver really breaks down his approach, talking about his meticulous information gathering, his risk management.
So it's not just about luck, it's about having a system.
Exactly. But Silver also points out that sports books, they're getting smarter about identifying and limiting these sharp bettors, He even shares a story about how he himself was limited by FanDuel.
Wait, they limited Nate Silver, the guy who wrote the book on predicting outcomes.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, but it highlights this trend in the industry.
Oh, as sports betting becomes more popular, it's becoming harder even for those really sharp bettors to consistently make a profit.
That's the takeaway. It's still a fascinating world, though, and Silver's insights give us this, this glimpse into the strategies and the mindset of those who operate in that high-stakes arena.
This has been so insightful already. I mean, we've gone from poker to slots to sports betting.
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
But I'm curious, does Silver give us any bigger takeaways? Like how to approach risk in other areas of life, not just gambling?
He does. In fact, he distills all of his observations to something he calls the 13 habits of highly effective risk takers.
Ooh, 13 habits.
Yeah.
That sounds intriguing. What are some of those?
Well, we'll have to save that for the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat, ready to hear more.
We'll definitely dive into those habits and all the other fascinating stuff Silver has to say about risk in the next part of our journey through On the Edge, the Art of Risking.
We just left off talking about Billy Walters and sports betting and all that, but now Silver takes us into a different world. Venture capital. I mean, it's kind of like gambling, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Instead of betting on cards or, which team's going to win, you're betting on the success of these startups.
Right, these fledgling companies.
And just like in any form of gambling, there are those who hit it big and those who, crash and burn.
High risk, high reward.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is how Silver draws these parallels between, those VCs, the venture capitalists, and other Riverians, as he calls them, like those poker players we were talking about.
Right, they both have that stomach for risk.
Absolutely. They're comfortable operating in that world of uncertainty. They're focused on those, those outsized returns, not just those small incremental gains.
So they're not afraid to go all in, even if it means losing everything.
Right. And Silver, he talks about how Silicon Valley, the heart of the tech world, really embodies this risk-taking mindset.
It's like their whole mantra, right? Fail fast, fail often.
Yeah, exactly. This idea that you have to be willing to take those big swings, to experiment, to push the boundaries, even if it means, face planting sometimes.
But that approach can be pretty risky, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
not every bet is going to pay off no matter how innovative the idea is.
Oh, for sure. And Silver uses the example of Adam Newman, the founder of WeWork, to kind of illustrate this point.
Ah, WeWork. That was a wild ride. What a story.
It was. And Newman, he was known for his, his bold, some might even say reckless approach.
Which ultimately led to the company's downfall.
Yeah, I mean, they were burning through cash, expanding way too fast.
A classic case of hubris, maybe, thinking you can defy gravity forever.
Maybe, but Silver, he's not just pointing fingers. He's saying, even in these failures, there are lessons to be learned.
It's like a poker player analyzing a bad beat, trying to
Yeah.
figure out where they went wrong.
Right, exactly. It's about learning from those mistakes, adapting, evolving.
So you don't get stuck in that cycle of failure.
Exactly. And this leads to a really interesting concept that Silver introduces. It's this idea of the river village conflict.
Okay, river village conflict. That sounds like some kind of epic battle.
It is kind of, but more of a clash of mindsets, really. The river, as we've been talking about, is that world of data-driven risk takers.
Right, the poker players, the VCs, the people pushing the boundaries.
Exactly. And the village, on the other hand, is this more traditional culture. The one that values stability, predictability. Not so much into those rapid changes and disruptions.
So it's like the disruptors versus the establishment, the innovators versus, I don't know, the gatekeepers, maybe.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And Silver argues that these two groups, they often have these totally contrasting views on, well, pretty much everything.
Like what? What kind of things?
Expertise, for one. Who gets to decide what's valid knowledge? They also have different views on risk, obviously, and how to manage it. And even on the role of technology, how much we should embrace it, how fast we should move.
It's like the village sees the river as these reckless cowboys, while the river sees the village as stuck in the mud, afraid to embrace the future.
That's a great way to put it. And the thing is, Silver doesn't take sides. He just presents this conflict and encourages readers to, consider both perspectives.
To figure out where they fall on that spectrum?
Exactly. Now, along with this river-village conflict, Silver brings in this other fascinating concept, effective altruism.
Okay. Effective altruism. I've heard that term thrown around a lot lately.
It's definitely having a moment. So it's this movement, right? This idea that we should use data and reason to figure out the most effective ways to do good in the world.
So instead of just blindly giving to charity, you're really thinking about where your money will have the biggest impact.
Exactly. It's like taking that poker player's mindset, those expected value calculations, and applying them to philanthropy, figuring out how to maximize your return on investment, but in terms of, making the world a better place.
So you're not just throwing money at a problem, you're strategically investing it.
Right. And Silver, he points out that EA, effective altruism, and the river, they share some core values.
Like what?
Well, both emphasize using data and evidence to make decisions, and both are willing to challenge conventional wisdom. But Silver also, he throws in this note of caution.
Oh, what's that?
He says that unbounded rationality, this idea that any action is justifiable as long as it has a positive expected value, while it can be dangerous if it's not, tempered with some ethical considerations.
Yeah, you can have the best intentions in the world, but if you're not careful, you can end up doing more harm than good.
And Silver, he uses the example of Sam Bankman-Fried, SBF, as a cautionary tale.
Oh, yeah, the whole
Oh.
FTX debacle. That was a wild story.
It was. And SBF, he was really into EA, effective altruism. But his risk tolerance was, well, extreme.
Yeah, he seemed to believe that any bet was okay as long as, in theory, it could lead to a net positive outcome.
Even if it meant risking, financial ruin for himself and others.
And obviously that didn't work out so well.
It didn't. And Silver, he really digs into what went wrong, exploring those factors that led to the collapse of FTX and those ethical questions, about the limits of pure rationality.
It's a reminder that even the smartest people can get caught up in their own ideas and lose sight of the bigger picture.
Absolutely. And this whole SBF saga kind of leads us into another hotbed of risk-taking. Cryptocurrency.
Oh, crypto. That's a whole other world of risk and reward.
Silver calls it the Wild West of risk, a place where, fortunes are made and lost overnight.
Yeah, it's definitely got that reputation.
And Silver, he explores this speculative frenzy, especially around
The
NFTs.
NFTs, yeah, those were everywhere for a while there.
They were, and he contrasts different approaches, different ways people navigated this new market.
Okay, like what?
He talks about this guy, Von Mises, who's a poker player and an NFT collector. And Von Mises, he approached it all with this, really calculated risk-averse strategy.
So even in this crazy, volatile world of crypto, there are people who can keep a cool head.
Right, but then he contrasts that with the story of this guy, Lai, who was an options trader, got caught up in the hype, chasing those early wins.
Got hit by that FOMO.
Exactly. And ended up losing a lot of money.
It's that classic gambler's trap, right? Chasing losses, trying to get back to even.
It is. And in the crypto world, where things move so fast, it's really easy to get swept up in that frenzy.
You got to have that emotional discipline.
You do. And this brings us back to SBF, who, in a lot of ways, embodied both the brilliance and the recklessness of the crypto world.
He was definitely a complex character.
He was, and Silver, he uses his interviews with SBF both before and after the FTX collapse.
Oh, wow. So he got to talk to him directly.
He did, to kind of paint this picture of SBF's mindset, how he justified those risks, how his thinking evolved even as things were falling apart.
It's like a case study in the dangers of, well, maybe too much belief in your own genius.
And a lack of, checks and balances.
Yeah, when you surround yourself with yes men, it's easy to lose perspective.
Exactly. And this leads Silver to the ultimate gamble, artificial intelligence.
Okay, now we're getting into some really big questions.
We are. He talks about AI as this potential force for good, but also this potential existential threat.
It's like that classic sci-fi trope, right? The machines taking over.
But now it's not just fiction anymore. And Silver introduces us to the work of OpenAI, which is a leading AI research lab, and their CEO, Sam Altman.
I've heard of him. He's been in the news a lot lately.
Yeah, he's a pretty influential figure. And Silver dives into this concept of P-doom, which is the probability of AI, leading to human extinction.
Wow, that's a pretty heavy topic.
It is. And Silver, he explores the different viewpoints of those experts in the field, from the alarmists to those who are more optimistic.
So even among the people who are building AI, there's this real debate about how dangerous it could become.
Absolutely. And Silver doesn't shy away from those ethical challenges.
Like the potential for bias or the need for, responsible innovation.
Exactly. He's urging us to think critically about the narrative surrounding AI, to not get swept up in the hype or the fear-mongering.
To find that middle ground.
To recognize the potential of AI, but also to proceed with caution.
This has been a pretty mind-blowing journey so far. We've gone from poker tables to Silicon Valley to the world of crypto, and now AI. It's like Silver's taking us on this grand tour of the human relationship with risk.
He is. And through it all, he's giving us a new way of thinking about what it means to take risks, to embrace uncertainty, to navigate a world that's constantly in flux.
It's not just about winning or losing. It's about making informed decisions, learning from your mistakes, and having the courage to pursue your goals even when the path ahead is unclear.
Exactly. And Silver's book, it's like a roadmap for navigating this complex terrain, full of insights and questions that can help us all become more effective risk takers.
And I think that's something we can all benefit from, whether we're, seasoned gamblers or just everyday people trying to make the best choices we can.
Absolutely. And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore Silver's conclusions, those 13 habits of highly effective risk takers.
I'm ready to unlock those secrets. Let's dive in. All right, so we've journeyed through poker, venture capital, AI, all sorts of risky landscapes with Nate Silver's On the Edge.
It's been quite the ride.
It has. And now, in this final part, we get to uncover those 13 habits of highly effective risk takers. It's like Silver's giving us the cheat codes to, mastering risk.
Well, not exactly cheat codes. It's not like a guaranteed formula for winning every bet.
Right, of course not.
Silver's point is more about giving us a framework for how to think about risk.
Okay.
Those guiding principles that can help us make better decisions and face those uncertain situations, with a more strategic mindset.
That's way more valuable than some, get-rich-quick scheme.
Absolutely. So some of these habits might seem, well, kind of obvious, like competitiveness.
Yeah, you got to have that drive, right? That desire to win.
Exactly. You don't see too many successful poker players who are content with just, folding every hand.
Right. You got to be in it to win it.
And then courage, of course. You have to be willing to take those chances, to put yourself out there, even when there's that possibility of, failing spectacularly.
But it's not just about being fearless, right?
Right.
It's got to be calculated. You got to weigh the risks and the reward.
Exactly. And that's where some of those less obvious habits come into play. Silver talks about coolness under pressure.
Okay, being able to keep your head when everyone else is losing theirs.
Exactly. Being able to make those rational decisions, even when the stakes are high, emotions are running hot, you know?
Like when you're facing that all-in bet in poker.
Exactly. You got to detach yourself from that immediate pressure, think long-term, strategically.
So emotional control, big one.
Yeah.
What else? What other kind of mental skills do these risk takers have?
Silver talks about something he calls strategic empathy.
Strategic empathy. Okay, what's that?
So it's not just about, understanding your own game, but about really getting inside your opponent's head.
Like reading their tells in poker.
Yeah, but even deeper than that, trying to understand their motivations, their fears, their whole thought process, basically.
To predict their next move.
Exactly, to anticipate their moves, understand their weaknesses, and then use that to your advantage.
That sounds like a crucial skill in, well, pretty much any competitive field.
It is, and this
Okay.
connects to another habit Silver talks about, having this raise or fold approach to life.
Okay, I love this poker analogy.
Yeah.
So how does raise or fold apply to, life outside the casino?
It's about recognizing that not every opportunity is worth pursuing. Sometimes the smartest move is to just walk away, cut your losses, and focus your energy on those things that you think have the best chance of success.
So knowing when to hold them, knowing when to fold them.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And that leads to this related concept that Silver really dives into, the importance of quitting.
Quitting.
Yeah.
We're always told to never give up, right? Perseverance is key and all that.
I know, right? But Silver, he challenges that conventional wisdom. He says quitting is often seen as this, weakness. But sometimes it's the boldest, most strategic move you can make.
It's about knowing when a particular path is no longer serving you and having the courage to, switch gears.
Exactly. He even uses the example of C.J. Anderson, the NFL player.
Okay, yeah, I know.
So Anderson, he retired pretty young,
And
not
that-
because he wasn't talented, but because he recognized it was time to move on, to pursue other things.
That's a powerful message, being honest with yourself, knowing your limits, having the courage to walk away from something, even if, it means letting go of past successes.
Right. It's about adaptability, which is another big theme in those 13 habits. Silver really emphasizes learning from your mistakes, always seeking those new challenges, evolving as the world changes around you.
So it's not about having this fixed mindset, right? You got to be
About-
flexible.
Exactly. And Silver gives all these examples from different fields, poker, sports betting, venture capital, to show how these habits, they really can lead to success.
So we've covered a lot in this deep dive. I mean, we started with the psychology of risk-taking, then the allure of gambling, then the challenges of, making decisions in a world that's full of uncertainty, and even the ethics of AI.
It's been a wild ride.
It really has. And I think Silver has given us a whole new way to think about what it means to take risks.
Right.
It's not just about winning or losing. It's about making those informed decisions, learning from mistakes, and having the courage to pursue your goals, even when, the path ahead is, well, a little bit foggy.
And most importantly, I think remembering that risk is just, part of life.
It's inevitable.
It is. It's what pushes us to grow, to innovate, to create something new.
It's about finding that balance, right, between being cautious and being bold.
Exactly. And on the edge, it gives us this roadmap for navigating those tricky waters.
I think that's something we can all take away from this book.
I agree. Whether you're a high roller or just someone trying to figure out, what to do with your life.
So to all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of risk.
And remember, sometimes the biggest rewards come from taking those calculated chances.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and, keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Yeah.
Until next time.